We will continue this EPA 608 Universal Certificate. We will continue Type 1 regulation. Okay, we'll start with introduction.
In this module, we will take a look at how the EPA defines small appliances and what the Type 1 certification covers.
The purpose of Section 608 is to regulate ozone-depleting substances, or ODS, and their substitutes. As you can tell by their name, these substances destroy the ozone layer. In EPA 608 Core, we learned that ozone destruction increases the risk of skin cancer and cataracts in humans. Ozone-depleting substances are CFCs and HCFCs. Their substitutes include HFOs. Appliances containing these refrigerants are subject to Section 608 regulations. Type 1 certification guides technicians in the service, repair, and maintenance of small appliances that contain CFCs, HCFCs, or HFCs. Technicians must have either Type 1 or Universal certification, which includes Type 1, to be able to service appliances covered under Section 608. Type 1 appliances must be hermetically sealed, fully charged, and contain less than 5 pounds of refrigerants. We will discuss each of these properties in more detail.
Up to how many pounds of refrigerant can Type 1 appliance contain? Up to 5 pounds.
Type 1 appliances are hermetically sealed. This means that their internal components are sealed from outside elements and are completely airtight. It's a little bit like how your phone is sealed off. The internal circuits and parts are sealed behind a protective housing. Refrigerant charge is the amount of refrigerant in a system. Type 1 appliances are factory charged, meaning the refrigerant inside the appliance is filled at the factory where it is manufactured. These appliances tend to be fully charged, so they do not need to be recharged by a technician. All the refrigerant that the appliance needs to operate is already in there and ready to go. Lastly, Type 1 appliances contain a maximum of 5 pounds of refrigerant. We will go over examples of these appliances so you get a sense of their size. Types 2 and 3 cover appliances with higher amounts of ozone-depleting refrigerant such as chillers and commercial freezers. Type 2 covers high and very high-pressure appliances, and Type 3 covers low-pressure appliances. Universal includes all 3 types of appliances.
Type 1 system can have 3 pounds of refrigerant. Yeah. Type 1 system need to be charged before use. No, it's factory charged. Hermetically sealed systems are systems that cannot lose refrigerant. Yeah. No, they will lose refrigerant, but the compressor is closed.
Like we discussed, small appliances are systems that are hermetically sealed, factory charged, and contain 5 pounds or less of refrigerant. We already know that 1 pound is equal to 16 ounces. Small appliances must contain less than 5 pounds of refrigerant, or less than 80 ounces of refrigerant. For the exam, we'll need to know the number of ounces in a pound. This lets us determine if a certain amount of refrigerant belongs in a small appliance. For example, the exam might ask if a small appliance can have 20 ounces of refrigerant. The answer would be yes, because 20 ounces is less than 5 pounds. Generally, small appliances would be items that are made for domestic use and not for industrial applications. Examples of small appliances include household items such as refrigerators, freezers, window AC units, and dehumidifiers. The following are appliances that are not necessarily for household use but still considered small appliances: water coolers, under-the-counter ice makers, and vending machines. Type 1 appliances contain smaller amounts of refrigerant than Types 2 and 3 appliances. You can think of Type 1 appliances as things you would see in your everyday life, like your freezer, window AC unit, or even ice machine. To reiterate, Type 1 regulates small appliances that contain ODS. For example, if a water cooler contains 3 pounds of R22, which is an HCFC, it would require Type 1 certification to handle and dispose of.
Small appliances include commercial freezer, commercial refrigerator, window AC. It's window AC. If a water cooler has 14 ounce of R134A, is it considered a Type 1 appliances under Section 08? Yeah, because it's less than 5 pounds. If a humidifier has 60 ounce of R32, is it considered a Type 1 appliance under Section 60A? Yeah, still under 5. If a humidifier has 60 ounce, by this way it will be no, because one will pass.
A desiccant dehumidifier does not require Type 1 certification. That is because a desiccant dehumidifier uses silica gel to remove humidity, not refrigerant. On the other hand, if a dehumidifier contains R410A refrigerant, it would require Type 1 certification to handle and dispose of. Examples of appliances that are not small appliances would be supermarket refrigerators, which are Type 2 appliances, and chillers, which are Type 3 appliances. MVAC and MVAC-like systems are also not covered under Type 1. MVAC stands for Motor Vehicle Air Conditioning. These are cooling systems found in cars and other motor vehicles. MVAC service and repair are covered under Section 609, not Section 608. Disposal and other procedures for MVACs and MVAC-like systems are covered under Section 608 Type 2. This is because these procedures involve working directly with refrigerants that are ozone depleting. For example, it may include buses that use R12, a CFC. These buses would be covered under Type 2, not Type 1. We learned that this is because the bus specifically contains CFC, which is ozone depleting.
MVAC are considered Type 1 appliances under Section 608, but MVAC-like systems are not. Yeah, no, neither. MVAC, no, it is for Type 2.
In this module, we went over what EPA Type 1 certification means and why one would need it. It's important to remember that Section 608 regulates substances that are harmful to the ozone layer. We compared Type 1 certification with Types 2 and 3 to see the differences between them. We also looked at examples of appliances that are and those that are not small appliances under Type 1.
This is the introduction. Let's check regulation review.
In this module, we will review the key regulations of the HVAC industry. These regulations apply to all technicians who maintain, service, repair or dispose of Type 1 equipment that could release refrigerant into the atmosphere.
Section 608 is the part of the Clean Air Act that focuses on regulating ozone-depleting substances, ODS. ODS is how the EPA will refer to these refrigerants in their documents and updates. Remember, it is your responsibility as a technician to be up to date on all EPA and local regulations.
Section 608 is a part of the Clean Air Act. True.
Technicians must have Section 608 certification in order to purchase refrigerants that are categorized as ozone-depleting substances and their non-exempt substitutes. As such, this sales restriction applies to CFCs, HCFCs, HFCs, and HFOs. Exempt substitutes are refrigerants that the EPA considers not harmful to the environment. An example of an exempt substitute is R744, which is carbon dioxide, or CO2.
Which of the following refrigerant is not covered by the sales restriction of Section 608? It is R134? No. R744. Yeah, because it's natural refrigerant.
Small cans of non-exempt substitutes are not covered by the sales restriction. Small cans contain 2 pounds or less of non-exempt refrigerant. This exemption is mostly used for small cans of HFC 134A. For example, if you do not have Section 608 certification, you can buy small cans of less than 2 pounds of HFC 134A.
If I don't have Section 608 certificate, I can buy 3-pound cans of R134A. It's 2 pounds.
As discussed in EPA 608 Core, there are additional requirements on recovery device, record keeping, disposal, etc. If specific Section 608 regulations are unclear, feel free to reference our core module on Section 608 regulations. The venting prohibition is part of Section 608. We learned that venting means to release refrigerants into the atmosphere. The venting prohibition states that it is illegal to intentionally vent ODS and their non-exempt substitutes. To ensure that harmful refrigerants are not accidentally released, technicians need to recover refrigerants before servicing appliances. Failure to do this may lead to the accidental release of the refrigerant while the cylinder is being serviced, causing harm to technicians.
We only have to recover refrigerants before servicing system containing CFC and HCFC. Yeah. No. We need to recover refrigerant before servicing any system containing CFC and HCFC and their non-exempt substitute. This include HFC and HFO refrigerant as well.
Technicians also need to use low-loss fittings to prevent the loss of refrigerant from hoses. Low-loss fittings work by blocking the flow of refrigerant through the hoses. Otherwise, refrigerant can be released through refrigerant hoses, and this would be illegal venting.
Low-loss fittings are required for servicing system containing ODS in order to comply with the venting prohibition. Low-loss fittings are required. System containing ODP. Yeah.
The EPA exempts refrigerants from the venting prohibition when it has determined that these refrigerants do not pose a threat to the environment. These include natural refrigerants, which occur naturally in the atmosphere. Natural refrigerants can be vented. These include Hydrocarbon, HC, refrigerants, R744, which is carbon dioxide, R717, which is ammonia, and R728, which is nitrogen. Trace gases that are used in leak detection are not considered refrigerants under the EPA's refrigerant management policies. Therefore, they are exempted from the venting prohibition.
Trace gases used for leak detection cannot be vented because they contained ODS. Okay, no, they can be vented. Trace gases are not considered refrigerant under Section 608.
Another example of acceptable venting is when we use nitrogen to pressurize or blow debris out of a system. Of course, all refrigerant in the system has to be recovered first before we can do this. Note that we cannot put nitrogen into a system that is fully charged. In this case, the refrigerant in the system has been recovered. As such, it is safe to vent the nitrogen used in the system because it is not mixed with refrigerant. Any refrigerant left in the system would be at trace amounts, which are insignificant.
Which of these can be vented? Okay, this, I think this 3. Yeah. Nitrogen can be used to pressurize it or blow debris out of the system containing a half charge of refrigerant. No, must be empty. If we use nitrogen to pressurize the system or blow debris out after fully recovering the refrigerant in the appliances, we can recover the nitrogen into the same recovery tank as the refrigerant, vent the nitrogen, vent the refrigerant because this, unless, yeah, we can vent the nitrogen.
In this module, we reviewed Section 608 regulations including the sales restriction and the venting prohibition. We discussed which refrigerants are subject to these regulations, and also which ones are exempt.
Okay.
In this module, we reviewed Section 608 regulations including the sales restriction and the venting prohibition. We discuss which refrigerants are subject to these regulations, and also which ones are exempt.
Okay, this is finished. Let's go to SNAB substitutes.
In this module, we will discuss how the SNAP program affects our use of refrigerants. We will also take a look at why SNAP may consider a refrigerant acceptable or unacceptable, and specific examples in each category.
We learned earlier that SNAP stands for the Significant New Alternatives Policy and is implemented by the EPA. The SNAP program was developed to evaluate new alternatives for phased-out refrigerant. The new alternatives accepted under SNAP are less harmful to the environment. The accepted refrigerants do not deplete the ozone layer and have low global warming potentials. The SNAP program classifies a refrigerant as either acceptable, unacceptable, or acceptable under use conditions. SNAP looks at the use of refrigerants in different types of appliances. For example, SNAP evaluates refrigerants for use in chillers, ice rinks, industrial ACs, and many other end uses.
Which of the following is not true? SNAP listed acceptable substitutes for phased out refrigerant for different categories of end use. SNAP is implemented by the EPA. Refrigerant can be classified as unacceptable under SNAP. Not of this. The SNAP program could label refrigerant as an acceptable substitute for use in the chiller, but an unacceptable substitute for vending machine. I don't know this one. Maybe false. Oh, this is true.
In Type 1, our focus will be on the refrigerants that SNAP considers acceptable for small appliances, which are considered Type 1 appliances. This means we will look at the substitutes SNAP considers acceptable for household appliances such as refrigerators or freezers. Note that SNAP approves substitute refrigerants for new appliances. Manufacturers then factory charge the new appliances with acceptable substitute refrigerants. This means that older appliances can still contain refrigerant that is not an acceptable substitute under SNAP. Unacceptable substitutes include older refrigerants or blends that are harmful for the environment.
Do you expect to see R22 listed in the acceptable substances? No.
HFC blends were used during the transition from CFCs and HCFCs. We learned earlier that under the Kigali Amendment of the Montreal Protocol, it was decided that HFC refrigerants would also be phased out due to their high global warming potential. Under the SNAP program, blends containing only are generally 2021 means you will not see HFC or HFC blends in new refrigerators, even though they're still in use in many old refrigerators. An example of an HFC blend is our 404A, which is a blend of 44% HFC 125, 4% HFC 134A, and 52% HFC 143A. Since all three components of our 404A are HFC refrigerants, our 404A is considered an HFC blend. This is why our 404A is designated by the SNAP program as an unacceptable substitute for use in household refrigerators and freezers. Because the EPA labels it as an unacceptable substitute, our 404A refrigerant is no longer factory charged in new household refrigerators and freezers.
Do you expect to see R404 in household refrigerant
As
and
of
freezer?
January 2021,
Yeah.
other unacceptable substitutes for new household refrigerators and freezers include R407C and R410A. We learned earlier that both R407C and R410A are HFC blends. This is why the SNAP program considers them unacceptable substitutes. As such, we will not see either of these refrigerants in new household refrigerators and freezers.
Do you expect to see R407 in the new household?
Acceptable
No.
substitutes are generally newer refrigerants that are not ozone depleting and have low global warming potential. Acceptable substitutes include hydrocarbons and certain refrigerant blends. Earlier, we learned that hydrocarbons such as propane and isobutane are considered natural refrigerants. They do not contain chlorine, so they are non-ozone depleting. They also have a global warming potential of 3, which is very low.
New household refrigerators and freezers can be factory charged with both. Yeah, isobutane is R290 is an acceptable substitute for all household refrigerant is an acceptable substance for new household.
For
Acceptable,
new
I think.
household refrigerators and
Yeah.
freezers, SNAP approves the use of hydrocarbons under certain use conditions. The concern with hydrocarbons is that they are highly flammable. Use conditions set by the EPA are set to deal with the risks involved when working with flammable hydrocarbons. The SNAP program issues the following use conditions for using hydrocarbons as a substitute. Maximum charge is £2, permanent labels are needed, and pipes and service ports need to be marked red. Hydrocarbons are used as a substitute in new household refrigeration appliances only. They are not approved for retrofitted appliances because of safety concerns around their high flammability.
New household refrigerator and freezers contain R290 can contain 3 pounds. No, maximum 2 pounds. We can retrofit an old appliances to operate on 2 pounds of R600.
Refrigerant
It's
blends that are
false.
accepted as substitutes generally have a much lower global warming potential than the refrigerants they are replacing. For example, R450A is an acceptable substitute for household refrigerators and freezers under the SNAP program. R450A is a blend of 42% HFC 134A and 58% HFO 1234Z. R450A is an alternative to R134A. Although R450A contains an HFC refrigerant, it is also blended with an HFO refrigerant, which gives it a lower global warming potential than R134A. The GWP of R450A is 547, which is 60% lower than the GWP of R134A.
Only refrigerant blends without HFC are acceptable under the SNAP program. Yeah. No. R450A is an acceptable substitute for use in new household refrigerators and freezers under SNAP. This means new household refrigerator and freezers can be factory charged with
To summarize,
450.
unacceptable substitutes are
Yeah.
generally refrigerants with high GWP, such as blends that are made entirely out of HFCs. However, refrigerant blends containing HFC refrigerants are considered acceptable because they have a lower global warming potential than the refrigerants they are replacing. Hydrocarbons are considered acceptable substitutes within the right use conditions, but existing systems cannot be retrofitted to use them. Equipment containing hydrocarbons must be marked with red to indicate the high risk of their flammability.
Okay, this let's check the refrigerant management after this the quiz for regulation for type 1.
In this module, we will review retrofitting and discuss the restrictions on using hydrocarbons in retrofitted systems. We will also look at how mixed refrigerant affects appliances and talk about how to prevent the mixing of refrigerants.
We learned earlier that retrofitting is the modification of a system's components to be compatible with a different refrigerant. Generally, we retrofit systems that used to operate on phased-out CFC or HCFC refrigerants so that they run on new refrigerant blends. For example, since R22 is phased out, we could modify or retrofit an R22 system to operate on a different refrigerant like R407C. SNAP regulates what refrigerants are acceptable for retrofitted systems, depending on the appliance's category. Make sure that the refrigerant you want to use in a retrofitted system is approved by SNAP as acceptable to use as a substitute in that category. For example, if we want to retrofit a household refrigerator containing R22, we'd need to look for acceptable substitutes for retrofitted household refrigerators. SNAP regulates the use of a refrigerant for retrofitting separately from its use in new appliances. For example, SNAP can find a refrigerant acceptable as a substitute for retrofitted system purposes but not acceptable as a substitute for use in new appliances. For household refrigerators and freezers, SNAP deems R407C acceptable as a substitute in retrofit applications, but not acceptable as a substitute in new appliances.
If a household freezers contain R22, we can retrofit it to operate it on. Okay, none of the above. Oh, let's
The alternative refrigerants that are
R410.
considered acceptable substitutes by the SNAP program may be used in existing systems. However, these alternative refrigerants cannot be used without retrofitting the system. A drop-in refrigerant is a refrigerant that can be used as a replacement for the original refrigerant without any modifications to the system. According to the EPA, there are no drop-in substitute refrigerants for R22. We must retrofit every system using R22 in order to use other refrigerants in those systems.
For R22, there are no drop-in substitutes. False.
Remember, we
True.
cannot retrofit a system to operate on hydrocarbon refrigerants. This is because hydrocarbons are highly flammable, and it would be dangerous if retrofitted components failed and leaked the refrigerant. Hydrocarbons can only be factory charged.
Which of the following statement is not correct? Hydrocarbons are sometimes not approved for retrofit appliance application. Okay, hydrocarbon are highly flammable. Hydrocarbon can only be factory charged. No. Okay. Cannot be. Are not acceptable substitute for retrofit appliance application.
The
All
thermal
the other
properties of a
statements are
refrigerant
correct.
allow it to go through phase changes at specific temperatures and pressures. This needs to happen in order for it to do its job of moving heat from one place to another. Mixed or contaminated refrigerants may have unpredictable thermal properties that cause the compressor to operate inefficiently, which can damage the components. Imagine mixing diesel and regular gasoline together, then using the mixture in your car. This is essentially what happens if we put contaminated refrigerant in our system.
Contaminated refrigerants can cause the appliance to last longer, cool less efficiency, optimize cooling, cool less efficiency.
Earlier, we learned that refrigerant must be reclaimed to virgin specifications before it can change ownership. We need to send the refrigerant to an EPA certified reclaimer to get it reclaimed. We also learned that for every batch of mixed refrigerant sent to the reclaimer, they may either refuse to accept it, charge you extra to separate the refrigerant mixture, or destroy the mixture.
Which of the following is true? You can only sell the refrigerant that is reclaimed to virgin specification. Reclaimed can refuse to accept contaminated refrigerant. Reclaimers can charge extra for processing contaminated
To prevent
refrigerant.
the
Yeah,
accidental
all of
mixing of refrigerants,
that.
we first need to check the appliance to see what refrigerant it contains. If you want to recover the refrigerant, make sure to use the right recovery cylinder for the type of refrigerant contained within the appliance. For example, we have an appliance that contains R22 refrigerant. In that case, we'll need to make sure we recover the refrigerant using a recovery cylinder designed for R22 refrigerant. Always remember that recovery cylinders can only be used for one type of refrigerant. For example, cylinders that previously contained R12 refrigerant cannot be used to recover R22 refrigerant as it would contaminate the refrigerant being recovered.
If we have two HFCs refrigerants, we can use the same recovery cylinder because they are the same type of
If you discover that
refrigerant.
refrigerant is mixed, you must turn it into a
No.
reclaimer to try to get it reclaimed. The reclaimer will assess whether the refrigerant can be restored to virgin specifications. If not, you will likely have to pay a fee for the reclaimer to destroy the refrigerant.
If we find the refrigerant that it is mixed, what must we do? Destroy it, send it to the EPA to be reclaimed, send it to ScaleCat to be reclaimed, send it to a certified reclaiming facility
In
to
this
be
module,
reclaimed.
we looked at two refrigerant management practices, retrofitting and preventing the mixing of refrigerants. In order to use a different refrigerant in any system, the system must first be modified to operate on the new refrigerant. It is wise not to mix refrigerant because reclaimers may refuse to reclaim it or charge you extra to destroy it. Mixed refrigerants can cause component failures, so they are not advisable to use in appliances anyway. If you discover that a refrigerant has been mixed, you must send it to a certified reclaimer for processing.
Yeah, so we started at type 1 regulation. We finished introduction, regulation review, and SNAP substitute and refrigerant management. Let's close it with refrigerant quiz. Attempt number 1. Now we have 36 question. Okay, let's check. Contaminated refrigerants can use appliance to last longer, cool less efficiency. If a household freezers contain R22, we can retrofit it to operate on R600A. If we find, I don't remember, but I think it's correct. If we find the fragrance that it is mixed, what should we do? So send it to certified reclaiming facility to be claimed. If we use nitrogen to pressurize a system or blow debris out after fully recovering the refrigerant in the appliances, we can vent the nitrogen, no need for it. What is the isobutane? R290, an acceptable substitute for all house refrigerant and freezer, an unacceptable substitute for new household and freezers, an acceptable substitute for new household refrigerant and freezer. I don't remember this one. I think acceptable. New household refrigerators and freezers can be factory charged with both. Small appliances include window AC. Up to how many pounds the refrigerant can type 1 appliances contain? Up to 5 pounds. Which of the following statement is not correct? Hydrocarbons are acceptable substitutes for retrofill appliances. Hydrocarbons are highly flammable. Hydrocarbon can only be factory charged. Hydrocarbon are acceptable substitute with use condition. Yeah. Which of the following is not true? SNAP list acceptable substitute for phased out refrigerant for different category. This end of end use. SNAP is implemented by EPA. Refrigerant can be classified as unacceptable under. Yeah, none of this. Not true. Which of the following statement is true about refrigerant recovery? You can only sell refrigerants that it is reclaimed to a version specification. Reclaims can refuse to accept contaminated refrigerant. Reclaimers can charge an extra for processing contaminated refrigerant. Yeah, all of the above. Which of the following refrigerant is not covered by the sales restriction of 608? I think it's ammonia. Which of these can be vented? Okay. Can be vented. I think this 3 because natural. I think. Do you expect to see R22 listed as an acceptable substitute under the SNAP program? No. Do you expect to see R4 in a household refrigerant and freezer? Yeah. Do you expect to see R407 in new household refrigerant and freezer? True. For R22 there are no drop in substitute. True. Hermetically sealed systems are systems that cannot lose refrigerant. False, they can lose it. If a humidifier has 60 ohms, okay, R32 is considered type 1. Yeah. If a humidifier has 90 ohms, no, it's not considered. If water cooler has 14 ohms, okay, it is, yeah, can use it as type 1. If I don't have section 608 certification, can I buy 3 pounds? No, 2 pounds. Until 2 pounds of R134. If we have 2 HFC refrigerator, we can use the same recovery cylinder? No. Lawless fittings are required for servicing system containing ODS in order to comply with the venting prohibition. Lawless fittings are required for yeah, this is correct. MVAC are considered type 1 appliances under section 608, but MVAC like system are not. No, both are not. New household refrigerators and freezers containing R290 can contain 3 pounds, 2 pounds. Nitrogen can be used to pressurize blow tippers out of the system containing a half of charge of refrigerant. No, must don't have any charge. Only refrigerant blends without HFC are acceptable under this. No. R450 is an acceptable substitute for use in new household refrigerant and freezers under SNAP. This means new household refrigerant and freezers can be factory charged with R48. Yeah. Section 608 is a part of the Clean Air Act. Yeah. The SNAP program could be labeled refrigerant A as an acceptable substitute for use in a chiller, but an unacceptable substitute for vending machine. Yeah. Trace gases used for leak detection cannot be vented because they contain ODP. No, we can't vent it. Type 1 system can have 3 pounds of refrigerant. Yeah. Type 1 system need to be charged before use. No, it's factory charged. We can retrofit an old appliances to operate on 2 pounds of R68. Yeah, we only have to recover refrigerator before servicing system containing CFC. No. Recover? I'm not remember this one. Okay, let's submit the answers. Okay, we have 8.61 of 10. Okay, let's see the wrong one. This number 2. If household freezer contain R22, we can retrofit it to operate. Okay, R410. And for 9 hydrocarbons are not acceptable substitute for retrofits. All the other statements are correct. Okay, hydrocarbon are acceptable substitute for retrofits. This one. Number 16. Do you expect to see R407 in the new household? It's false. We can retrofit all the appliances to operate on 2 pounds of R600A. False. 36. We only have to recover refrigerant before servicing system containing CFC and HCFC. It's false. Okay, that's all for regulation. This one. Okay, the next one, it will be recovery. Okay, we finish here type 1 regulation. The next video, it will be recovery.
فاكرني مش عارف